Graham, the first question is, what, from where does your interest in this controversial case come from?
Well, I was raised only a few minutes from the Trinity Commons Shopping Center, and so immediately the case drew my interest because it was something that took place in an area of town that I considered relatively safe and that I had been to many times. And then I also found myself interested in this idea of a very serious crime being committed by someone who had never committed a crime before, almost as if a regular citizen had just out of the blue committed murder.
And when did you start following the case?
Well, I read about the case immediately when it happened, and it was after Mr. Coleman's conviction that I began to seriously think about writing something about it, and then I had to wait until his address was available on the Department of Corrections website, which actually took quite some time. I wasn't able to write to him and try to get an interview from him until then.
And how long after the incident, which was in February of 2009?
Yes, and so it was really, he had already been in the system for 2 years by the time he received my first letter.
And how did he respond to that letter?
Well, it took him some time to respond to it, and in fact, it took several letters to convince him to allow me to interview him. We corresponded for half a year before I ever made my first trip to the prison. His initial response was, "I'll be happy to talk to you when the time is right, but the time isn't yet right." And that eventually became, "I'll talk to you off the record," and that eventually became, "I'll talk to you on the record."
That's almost like a great, shall I call it a fishing expedition almost, that you had to
It was.
be careful and make sure you won his confidence before you got anywhere with the story.
Yes, that's exactly right. And I knew going in that there was a good chance that I would never have the opportunity to write a word. And so it really was, to use your phrase, a fishing expedition. And I was pleased by the way it worked out.
Good. And what about the other witnesses and participants? Were they very cooperative in working with you?
Well, Mr. Coleman made available to me his family and his attorneys, which was a great boon for the story. The Schwerens, the children of the victim, declined through their attorney to participate. A couple of other witnesses were unresponsive to a number of requests.
People will have to read the story
Exactly.
to see how that works out.
Yes.
But you got full cooperation from both sides of the defense and the prosecution?
Not the prosecution, but the defense.
The prosecution, you had to rely entirely on what?
Well,
record.
That's exactly right. And because Coleman was convicted, in a sense, the trial transcript tells the prosecutor's story. The defense's story, and particularly certain elements of it, aren't told because they didn't make it into the case. And so this story explores some of those things that didn't make it into the trial transcript.
Now, this is one of the longest stories Memphis Magazine has run in many, many years, probably 15 years since we've had an 8,000-word story in the magazine. Obviously, you don't write those over a weekend. Could you tell us a little bit about the process by which you got this wonderful, I hate to call it a novella because it's true, but it's a wonderful nonfiction piece.
I guess I should begin by saying that I am a full-time college professor, and so while I have more time to write than say, Wallace Stevens coming home from a day of selling insurance, I still am bound by a certain amount of professional obligations. So toward the end of the spring 12 semester, I began working seriously on the piece, a page, a paragraph here and there. And the bulk of the piece was completed during a residency at the Virginia Center for the Creative Arts in Amherst, Virginia. I was actually there to write poetry, which I would do in the morning, and then in the afternoon I would kind of sneak off and finish this essay. And so that was a 2-week period where I would say I wrote 75% of the piece.
Excellent.
So I guess all told about 3 months.
And the case is still very much alive, as we were just discussing, that it's going through the appeal process, and so it's by no means over at this stage, would you say?
Yes, that's exactly right. Of course, Coleman had an initial appeal before the trial judge, John Folks, and that was summarily denied. Trial judges almost never overturn a jury's verdict, I understand. Today, the Tennessee Court of Criminal Appeals heard Coleman's first appeal from outside of the initial courtroom. And if that appeal is successful, then Coleman will be granted a new trial, and we should have that ruling sometime in the next 4 or 5 months.
Excellent. Okay, well, thank you, Graham, for